All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Let us begin. We have a beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Membeis 42. Sorry, I forgot to put out on the chat last night where we're starting. We're going to start on Membeis and Aleph, the two dots. Aval Nosin. It is 2, 4, 6, 8. 10 lines down from the top. Our shir this morning is dedicated by our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Nisan, Frank and Debbie Spector, with deep gratitude to the entire Kehillah. Paul and Kathy Palik, our Talmud Torah sponsors for Nisan, memory of Paul's father Shmuel ben Zechariah, his mother Sarah bas Avram, great-grandmother Cyril bas Reb Dov. Our shir this morning is dedicated by Heshi and Sandy Schoenfeld, and Menachem and Susie Schoenfeld, in the merit of an Aliyas Neshama for Mr. Schoenfeld's mother, Salima Schoenfeld, Sarah Leah bas Moshe Halevi, and an anonymous sponsor this morning dedicating the daf in the Zechus of Rafur Shalima from Mordechai David HaKohen ben Pesalea. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah, the families in Nechama, and Kol Cholei Yisrael will enjoy a complete and enduring refuah. And I will say with that, let us begin. So I'm sure as you saw over Yom Tiv, we really began some incredibly dramatic and amazing sugyas regarding bishul, regarding cooking on Shabbos, or hopefully the avoidance of cooking on Shabbos. So we'll say, let's go back there. We're going to see some very interesting halachas today. So remember again, the Mishnah that we're dealing with over here was actually a little bit of a cryptic Mishnah, because it wasn't immediately clear what the Mishnah was trying to teach us. This was the Mishnah of Hamecham Shepino. So a person literally has like a pot or a kettle, and pinot. So remember again, we saw already, does pinot mean you remove it from the fire? Does pinot mean that maybe ultimately again you're removing the contents of the pot? What exactly does pinot mean? But let's assume right now that ultimately, again, we're talking about removal of the contents, because we're going to see the next Mishnah is actually going to discuss in depth the halachos concerning a kli rishon which has been removed from the fire. But let's see. The Gemara begins the sugya. Tan Rabbanan. We'll say this is actually a great issue. Great issue. This is a fascinating case, as this often comes up over the course of Shabbos. Tan Rabbanan. No sin adam chamin l'so chatzonin, v'lo chatzonin l'so chachamin. Divrei Beis Shammai. So Beis Shammai says a person could pour hot water into cold water, but cannot pour cold water into hot water on Shabbos. These are the words of Beis Shammai. Now I will say, what's happening over here? Take a look at Rashi. Chamin l'soch tzonin de kasavar tasoa gavar ve'in hachamin marsichen es hatzonin ela mafshiran. So we'll say this is actually quite interesting. This actually is a discussion that comes up in Maseches Chulin. So many of us who were doing the daf the last cycle remember this discussion. This comes up often in the context of basar and chalav, when you have meat and milk mixtures. There's a fundamental machlokes that exists in halacha of tisai gavar o ilai gavar. That when you mix two things together and you pour or you put one thing on top of another, which item asserts mixture dominance? Is it the upper item or is it the lower item? So Beis Shammai holds halacha l'maisa that in general, when you mix two things together, he holds tasoi gavar. It is the item on the bottom that asserts mixture dominance. Then I will say, therefore, this is very important. This leads Beis Shammai to say, you can pour hot water into cold water, but you cannot pour cold water into hot water. Now, it makes sense. Why? Because if you pour cold water into hot water, so what happens? So the bottom, let's start the opposite way. If you pour hot water into cold water, that's going to be okay. Because remember, according to Beis Shammai, the bottom item always asserts dominance. So therefore, if you pour hot water into cold water is dominant. What is it going to do? Cool down the hot water. Okay, that's not a problem on Shabbos. On the flip side, says Beis Shammai, to go ahead and pour cold water into hot water, if the bottom water, the hot water, is going to assert dominance, then what? Then halacha l'maisa, you will end up cooking the water on Shabbos. Ubeisila, because you also remember again, the act of cooking when it comes to water on Shabbos is any act which allows for water to rise up above Yad Solad Espo. Remember again, Yad Solad Espo is the temperature that is so hot that if a hand were to touch it, the hand would recoil. So remember, technically, you could go ahead and achieve that even outside of a kli rishon, even outside. Remember again, just for our Shabbos purposes, so definition purposes, kli rishon, first utensil, that refers to the utensil in which the cooking usually occurs. That's called your Kli Rishon. We're going to discuss about the status of a Kli Rishon when it's on the fire, off the fire. Kli Sheni is if you were to take the contents of the Kli Rishon, pour it into a second utensil, that second utensil is your Kli Sheni. Your Kli Sheni, and so on and so forth. Kli Shlishi, which we'll discuss, is you transfer the contents from the second utensil into the third utensil. So, for example, if you have a pot of soup, and let's say you're an old school kind of guy, you don't like using ladles, you just like to go ahead and pour soup directly into bowls. So then again, your soup bowl is going to be your Kli Rishon. Your soup pot is your Kli Rishon. Your soup bowl is your Kli Sheni. Just to illustrate, or a little bit differently, your urn on Shabbos is your Kli Rishon. The cup in which you pour the water is your Kli Sheni. That's actually going to come up in just a little bit. So that's the position of Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel says, Bein chamin l'socha tzonin, bein tzonin l'socha chamin motor. Beis Hillel, on the other hand, say no. The truth is, you could pour hot water into cold water, and you could pour cold water into hot water. Either way, it's mutter. I have a medram amurim. When is that so? Because that's talking about a cup. So we'll say if you have a cup, so Beis Shammai says that halacha l'maisa, if you have a cup, Rashi says over here, this is actually very interesting. So Rashi says if you have a cup, it's mutter. Now why? What's unique? Ambati, and we'll say ambati literally means a bathtub. Now you have to understand the context. We saw this already in last week's daf. When they speak about a bathtub, so they're speaking about a structure that's in the ground that almost always has a fire underneath it. So that ambati is pretty much like a Kli Rishon. That's like a primary utensil that's on the fire itself. So Beis Hillel says you could pour hot water into cold water into hot water, no problem, as long as what? As it's in a Kli Sheni. It's in what he calls a cup. But if it's in a Kli Rishon, then it's problematic, right? He says, Aval ba'ambati, let's finish the sentence, Aval ba'ambati, chamin l'socha tzonin. So if you're in a bathtub, which we're both saying again, a Kli Rishon, then what? You could pour hot water into cold water, v'lo tzonin l'socha chamin. But you may not pour cold water into hot water. But Rabbi said, let's talk about this in just a moment. So what's unique about the cup? So this is a fascinating, riveting Rashi. So look at this. Because Rashi says, because the l'shtia kabaylahu v'lo neichalahu she'achumu harbe. So this is very interesting. So in general, when water is in a cup, that means someone's going to drink it. If you're going to drink it, so a person doesn't want their drink to be too hot, right? Because if the drink is too hot, then what? Then I can't drink it. So the automatic assumption is that when something is in a cup ready to be drunk, so the heat is already going to be a little bit lower. That's not going to have the capacity to cook. Furthermore, Rashi says over here, va'od the Kli Shenihu. So we'll say there's a lot of discussion here about why Rashi even needs to include the first part, right? You'll see why it's necessary later on, because at the end of what's important for us is this is a Kli Sheni. We assume in halacha, Rabbi said just a couple of things that the Gemara presupposes we know, even though it doesn't say it explicitly yet, it will, is that Kli Sheni eino mevashal. A secondary utensil does not have the capacity to cook. Now, Rashi is not really saying two shitas. Rashi is really saying the same thing. That in general, because the contents of my cup I'm going to drink, therefore by definition, it's not going to be too hot. Because if it's too hot, I can't drink it. And furthermore, the cup is a Kli Sheni. So we'll say, let's get what we have over here. Fundamental machlok is Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. According to Beis Shammai, so can you pour cold water into hot water into cold water? So Beis Shammai says this is not really a hot water, cold water thing. This is a tasai gavar. Whenever you have a mixture, the item on the bottom of the mixture always asserts mixture dominance. So because of that, you can go ahead and pour hot water into cold water because that'll just cool off the hot water. That's fine on Shabbos. But according to Beis Shammai, you may not go ahead and pour cold water into hot water. Why? Because ultimately, again, that hot water will cook up the cold water. Beis Hillel says, well, no, it depends. So Beis Hillel does not really get into tasai gavar, oilai gavar. He doesn't get to any of that. Instead, what Beis Hillel says is that halacha l'maisa, we look at where you're pouring the water. Where is the pouring occurring? If the pouring is occurring in a Kli Sheni, then there's no problem. There's no problem. You can pour hot into cold into hot, no problem. Ba'ambati, in a Kli Rishon, then ultimately again, you could pour hot into cold, but not cold into hot. beautiful. Rabbi Shimon Menasya Oser. Rabbi Shimon Menasya says it's all Aser. So we'll say, so we're going to have to see what he's actually referring to over here. Rashi says, Oser afidu chamin l'soch tzonin. So it sounds like Rabbi Shimon is saying you can't even pour hot water into cold water, which is interesting because what would really be the problem with that? But we'll see. Rav Nachman says, halacha Reb Shimon ben Menasya. So Rav Nachman says that the halacha follows Reb Shimon ben Menasya. So Rav Yosef Lemer. So we'll say, so what does that mean? So Rav Yosef. So we're going to analyze now Reb Shimon ben Menasya's shita. So we have Beis Shammai, we have Beis Hillel, we have Reb Shimon ben Menasya. So Rav Nachman. So Rav Yosef Lemer. Safal Hari Kambati. So Rav Yosef wanted to say that a safal. I will say now a safal is a wash basin. A wash basin. Now this is really quite fascinating. Rav Yosef wanted to say that a wash basin is treated like a kli rishon. Look at Rashi. Safal hu ka'ambati. Va'af agav the kli sheni hu. Hoyol v'lav d'shtia elo l'rechitza asiri. Now watch this, I will say. How could you possibly say that a wash basin is going to be like an ambati? Remember, the bathtub is a kli rishon. So how could you possibly say that the wash basin is going to be like a kli rishon, like an ambati? So this is fascinating. Let's go back. Remember again. According to Rashi, why is it that Beis Hillel is not worried about the kos, the cup, and doesn't care if you put hot into cold, cold into hot? So second, he said it's a klisheni. But remember, why aren't we concerned that the klisheni is going to cook? Because remember again, what does a person do with the klisheni? They drink from it. So because they're drinking from it, by definition, they're not going to allow the contents to be too hot. But says Rav Nachman, that doesn't apply with a wash basin. With a wash basin, in fact, the person dafka wants the water to be very hot. In other words, we'll say a person will often wash with water that may be hotter than what they would drink. So lemaisa again, and especially if the wash basin, the waters might sit there for a little bit of time. So a person wants the water ultimately again to be hot. Therefore, halacha lemaisa, it could very well be that in the wash basin, even Beis Hillel would agree that halacha lemaisa, you can't pour cold water into hot water, even though again the wash basin is technically a klisheni. Going back, now you understand why Rashi mentioned both of those items. Because you see about say that apparently according to the Gemara right now, there is a case of a klisheni where we still wouldn't allow cold water to be poured into hot water. So if the klisheni is for consumption purposes, we assume the contents, the heat of the hot item is going to be low enough that you could drink it, therefore it won't cook. But for a wash basin, for example, we see that there can still be a problem. To which the Gemara says, Savra Yosef Safal Kambati, Amle Abaye, Tani Reb Chia Safal Ino Kambati. So Abaye said, Reb Chia said no. Reb Chia said that a safal is not like a bathtub, but rather again that the safal, the wash basin, is a klisheni. So ulamai the salak adaita meikar the safal hare kambati. So we'll say according to that havamina that we had before, that according to at least some opinions, that the wash basin will be like the bathtub, will be treated like a kli rishon. And Rav Nachman said that halacha was Reb Shimon ben Menasya, ala b'Shabbos rechitza b'chamin leka. According to that case, we'll say that would mean that's that there is no possibility to ever wash yourself with hot water on Shabbos. And we'll say, remember again, you saw over the last days of Yantiv the incredible sugya, at least over on Shri Yishal Pesach, you saw the incredible sugya of Gezeras Merchatz, right? So you saw that whole sugya. But I will say, but even Gezeras Merchatz, no one was suggesting that halacha l'maisa, if you were to go ahead and heat up water before Shabbos and put it in a basin, no one was suggesting that you should not be able to use that water in a basin to wash your face, right? No one was suggesting that. Yeah, in other words, let me say that differently. In other words, it seemed to be clear that halacha l'maisa that would be absolutely fine, right? The issue was more full body bathing or entering into a bathhouse. But if you were to prepare a basin with hot water before Shabbos, you could definitely use it on Shabbos. The problem is, I will say, that over here it sounds like that halacha l'maisa, if you're holding that the safal, the wash basin, is like the ambati, like the kli rishon, then there could even be a problem of ever finding a case where halacha l'maisa you could even wash your hands and your face with hot water prepared before Shabbos, and that's an untenable position. The Gemara says, "Mi sabres Rabbi Shimon aseifa." To which the Gemara says, "You're right. You're right. Do you think that Rabbi Shimon was referring to the first part of the discussion over here. Rather, no, the Gemara says, I'm sorry, Misavish Rabbi Shimon Asefakoi, Areshakoi. Rabbi Shimon ultimately, again, was speaking ultimately again on the Resha, not on the Sefer, not on the second part of the discussion, but rather on the Resha. So we'll say, how so? Watch this. Ubeis Hillel Matirin, Bein Chamin Lesoch Tzonin, Ubein Tzonin Lesoch HaChamin. Rabbi Shimon was commenting on the following statement. Beis Hillel said that I will say when the water in question is in a kos in a klisheni, Beis Hillel says you could pour hot water into cold water or cold water into hot water, because remember again, Beis Hillel says once it's in a klisheni, there's no concern about bishul. Once there's no concern about the bishul, then what? You could pour hot water into cold water, which I will say everyone agrees, so at least for now, is fine, but you could even pour cold water into hot water. For Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya oser tzonin l'sochamin. So Rabbi Shimon comes along ultimately again to argue on Beis Hillel in the Seifa, and they say ultimately again, I'm sorry, in the Reisha, and they come to say Beis Hillel, no. We agree with you in the case that you could pour hot water into cold water, but you may not pour cold water into hot water, even in a klisheni. Even in a klisheni. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says, Arei shakoi, l'shtia, v'sonin l'so chamin dekashara Beis Hillel ka'aser. So we'll say Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya is coming to argue on Beis Hillel, that whereas Beis Hillel allows you to pour cold water into hot water in a klisheni, Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya says that such a practice will be aser. To which the Gemara says, okay, lema Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya damar ki Beis Shammai. So both say, so then I don't understand. It pretty much sounds like Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya is holding Beis Shammai, because let's remember again, what did Beis Shammai say? If you remember again, Beis Shammai didn't make a chilik between a kli rishon and a kli sheni, because in Beis Shammai's world, what is this all about? This is about tasai gavar. This is about whenever you mix two items together, the item on the bottom of the mixture always asserts mixture superiority. So according to Beis Shammai, it sounds like on Shabbos, you really can never pour cold water into hot water. That's kind of what it sounds like. Because remember again, even the Gemara doesn't make a chilik in Shitas Beis Shammai between a kos, it doesn't make any distinction. So pretty much Rosh Hashanah is saying the same thing as Beis Shammai. What's the chilik between Rosh Hashanah and Beis Shammai? To which the Gemara says, no, hachi kamar. Lo nechlaku Beis Shammai Beis Hillel b'davar zeh. Wow. So no, both say actually, Rosh Hashanah is coming to reframe the machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. And according to Rosh Hashanah, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel never disagreed regarding this matter. In other words, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agreed that halacha l'maisa, you can't pour you can't pour cold water into hot water. Amr Fun Rabbi Yeshua, Chazina leila Rava delo kapid amona. So listen to this. I will say, so Rav Huna Rabbi Yeshua said, I saw that Rava did not seem to be makbid on this. Doesn't seem makbid on this. Meditani Rabbi Chia. So listen to this, because Rabbi Chia wrote, no sin adam kiton shalmayim l'soch safel shalmayim. Now, both say, first we're going to literally translate this, and then we'll see how the Gemara actually understands this case. So literally translated, a person could take ketone is like a flask or a jug. A person could go ahead and take a jug of water, a flask of water, and put it into a safel, put it into a basin of water, bein chamin l'soch tzonin, bein tzonin l'soch chamin. Whether you're putting cold water into hot water or hot water into cold water. So we'll say, so this seems to reflect the initial view of Beis Hillel. Of Beis Hillel before, not Beis Hillel according to Rabbi Shimon ben Menasya, but rather ultimately again just Beis Hillel on his own. Because remember again, the Safal case of Osai is a basin. The basin is what? The basin is a klisheni. Beis Hillel originally said that a klisheni doesn't cook. So therefore, again, what it pretty much sounds like over here is you could put a flask of water into a basin of water, whether the flask is cold and the basin is hot, whether the basin is cold and the flask is hot. Doesn't make any difference. Tushner says, 1 second. Amrle Rafun Ravashi, Dilma Shani Hasam, Demifsakli. 1 second. Look at the wording of that case of Osai. What does this case sound like? This case sounds like what? Maniach Adam. Oh, what's the lashon? I'm sorry. No sein adam kiton shalmayim. Both say, if you literally translate this, what does this sound like? You're putting a flask of water. So we'll see, what does this sound like is happening over here? You're taking water in the receptacle, and you're placing the receptacle in the basin. In the basin. Not the pshat that you're pouring out the contents of the receptacle into the basin, but you're placing the basin itself you're placing the receptacle itself into the basin to heat up the contents. Maybe, says the Gemara, says, Shiny Hasam, the mifsa kli. Maybe that case is different. Why? Because ultimately, again, you have a barrier, right? The basin, even if the basin is very hot, it doesn't have the ability to cook the contents of the ketone of the flask very well. Why? Because the Lamaisa, there is a kli that's interposing. On both sides, by the way, this is a very Lamaisa case. What does this sound like a lot? Right, so for some of us this is Lamaisa, for others this is Hayinu Kicholmim, right? Heating up a baby bottle on Shabbos. Right, so we'll say again, a person wants to heat up a baby bottle on Shabbos, so what do? You take a cup of water from the urn. Right, so listen, you take a cup of water from the urn, you go ahead and you fill up the cup with hot water, you now take a bottle that's cold, you want to go ahead and take a cold item and put it into a hot item, but again, the mifsakli, there's a baby bottle that's there in order to go ahead and, that's interrupting. To which the Gemara says, no. The Gemara says, itmar. So the Gemara says, no. It doesn't really mean that you're putting the water in the utensil into the basin. Rather, you're pouring the water. The Gemara says, ma'ara adam kidon shamayim l'soch safel shamayim bein chamen l'soch tzonein bein tzonein l'soch chamen. So I will say, because there's an alternate reading, and in the alternate reading of this, it leaves out the lashon of ketone. You're not putting the flask into the water. Rather, again, you're pouring the contents of the cold flask into the hot basin. So both say, the way the Gemara sounds off, the way the Gemara ends off, is kind of by teaching. It sounds like it's saying that the halacha follows Beis Hillel, but not Beis Hillel as defined or as explained by Rabbi Shmuel Silber, but Beis Hillel in the Pure from Beis Hillel is saying that pretty much kli sheni, right, a secondary utensil, does not have the capacity to cook, and therefore halacha l'maisa in a kli sheni. Remember, we'll say we're most interested in the case of cold water into hot water. The case of hot water into cold water, there's no real chiddush. I mean, we'll see a little bit of a chiddush later on when the Gemara talks, or the Mishnah talks about sometimes heating stuff up in untreated metal, but that's not really the Maisa for us. The case that's really the Maisa for us is the case of pouring cold water into hot water. So, because also remember again, this is Maisim B'chol Yom. A person makes themselves a cup of tea or a cup of coffee on Shabbos. We'll have to see how to properly do that. It's going to be our next sugya. I will say, but the idea is I make a cup of coffee or I make a cup of tea. It's too hot. So again, I have my tea in a kli sheni. That mug is a kli sheni, right? So now I want to pour some cold water into my kli sheni. Beis Shammai would say unequivocally aser. Tasaigav, you're going to cook the water, right? And again, very often a tea could absolutely be yad sola dispo, right? Beis Menasya unequivocally aser. Beis Hillel seems to say absolutely mutter. Why? Because kli sheni, a secondary utensil, does not cook. So we'll say, so that's the end of the sugya. So how do we paskin? So the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Shin Yud Ches, Sif Beis, very exciting sugyas because this is mamish all Hilchos Shabbos. So listen to the Shulchan Aruch. He says, Meicham, this is Shin Yud Ches 318, Sif Yud Beis, Halacha 12. Meicham shepina mimenu mayim chamin. Mutter litin l'soch mayim tzonin kedei lahav shiran. Umutter lotzok mayim chamin l'soch mayim tzonin. Ot tzonin l'soch chamin. V'hu shelo iyu bekli rishon mipnei shemis chamin harbe. So we'll say this is interesting. So first, the Shulchan Aruch actually begins with the case of the Mishnah, which is that if you have a kettle that you removed from the fire and you cleared out the contents of that kettle. So for example, you poured out all the water of that kettle. So the Shulchan Aruch paskins that technically speaking, you could put into that kettle now, even though it's very hot, you could put in there cold water in order to take the chill off the water, with the condition that what? You pour in a lot of cold water at once, so that therefore the water has no ability to become really heated up, to become above Yad Sola Despo. So you could introduce a lot of water at once in order to go ahead and chill down. Generally, we don't do this. We stay away from a Kli Rishon, even if it's taken off of the fire on Shabbos. But for our purposes, the Shulchan Aruch says that halacha l'maisa, you could pour hot water into cold water or cold water into hot water. V'hu shelo yu b'kli rishon. So we'll say so to put it a little bit differently, halacha l'maisa, once you are going ahead and once you are dealing in a kli sheni, halacha lemaisa, you are permitted to introduce cold water even into the hot contents of a kli sheni. So I'll say again, another example. This is up. Let's say you're not using a ladle. We'll say the status of a ladle in Hilchos Shabbos is actually quite interesting. Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa, we're going to actually get into this. We'll discuss is that a ladle sometimes could be a kli sheni, and a ladle could sometimes be a kli shlishi. If you leave the ladle in the pot, but the truth is, if you leave the ladle in the pot, Shmir Shabbos actually says that it can become a kli rishon. It becomes part of the pot. But assuming you're just quickly using it, dunking in, taking out, the ladle is the kli sheni, the plate is the kli shlishi. We'll see. This is actually this. You would be surprised how much a ladle could have an impact on your life. Because whether or not that ladle is a kli sheni or a kli rishon will fundamentally determine what you are permitted to introduce into your bowl of soup. It's actually quite amazing. Again, we'll get to very excited. We're going to get to all of this. I will say, but again, just to understand now, so you make a cup of tea on Shabbos, the tea is too hot, piping hot. Halacha l'maaseh, you could introduce cold water into that cup of tea. Why? Because the cup is a kli sheni. We pass like Beis Hillel, kli sheni eina mavashal. You pour soup from the pot into your bowl. The soup's too hot. You want to put a little bit of water in the soup. Halacha l'maaseh, you're permitted to do that. Why? Soup bowl is considered to be a kli sheni. We pass in kli sheni eina mavashal. The secondary utensil doesn't have the capacity to cook, and therefore you can introduce cold water even into the hot contents of the kli sheni. Not like Beis Shammai, not like Rabbi Shimon ben Asya, but passing in accordance with Beis Hillel. Shulchan Aruch gives other examples of the truth is where even technically you can go ahead and introduce things into a kli rishon that's not agabe ha'esh, but we'll leave that for now. Beautiful. We'll say let's go weiter. Says the Mishnah. This is another great case. Ha'ilfos v'akedera shevir merusachim. So we'll say now we're dealing with an interesting case. Ilfos is literally like a pan. Like a frying pan, right? The frying pan or kedera is a pot which were removed from the fire while still hot. So we'll say this is a case of what we call kli rishon shelo al gabe ha'esh, primary utensil, which is the utensil used for cooking that is not on the fire, right? It was removed from the fire. So we'll say, so what does the Mishnah say? So Rashi, we're not going to get into this now. Rashi has this whole thing over here that this is happening being a shmashas. So we're going to see that halacha l'maisa, the timing of this has absolutely no ramification on the sugya. So we're gonna sidestep it just a bit. So we'll say if you have a frying pan or you have a pot which were removed from the fire while still hot. Lo yitain l'sochan tavlin. You are not permitted to go ahead and introduce spices into the pot. We'll say this is an incredible yisod, right? So now you take your food off. So now your food is in a kli rishon, but the kli rishon has been removed from the fire. You take a little taste. Okay, not a good idea to do that from the kli rishon, but you took a little taste, which is okay, and you realize, needs more spices. So instead of having everyone go ahead and spice their own food, I just want to put some spices into the kli rishon. So the Mishnah says you're not allowed to do that. You cannot put spices into a kli rishon. We will say, why is that? Because a kli rishon, even when it has been removed from the fire, still has the ability to cook. Amud Beis. Avol no sin l'socha karo or l'socha tamchui. But I will say, once you go ahead and you transfer the contents of the pot or the frying pan into kara is a dish, right? Tamchui is a larger dish, right? So ultimately, again, you could then go ahead and season the food in the kli sheni, which again, I will say, is more of the same. You see, the theme, kli sheni is not mevashal. Right? Kli sheni doesn't have the ability to cook. So we'll say the chiddush over here of the Mishnah is that you might have thought that only a kli rishon al gabe ha'esh, only a kli rishon on the fire has the ability to cook, but once it's removed from the fire, it doesn't have the ability to cook. Kamash malon, no. Kamash malon, even once it's been removed from the fire, halacha l'maisa, it still does not have the ability to cook. Therefore, once removed from the fire, it still does have the ability to cook. Therefore, when you remove your Kli Rishon from the fire, you should not spice that food in the Kli Rishon. Transfer the contents of the Kli Rishon ultimately again to the dish, to the kara, to the tamchui, and season it there. Rabbi Huda says, "L'kol hu nosein chutz midavar sheyish bo chometz v'tzia." So Rabbi Huda says, and I both say the Gemara is going to say we're not exactly sure what exactly Rabbi Huda is saying, but here's the translation. Rabbi Huda sounds like he's saying is you can add spices as long as the food that you are spicing does not have vinegar or brine. Because apparently vinegar or brine, have the ability to go ahead and cook up spices in a much more accelerated way. Now, we don't know exactly what he's referring to. We'll see that in the Gemara. Say, suppose the Gemara starts by asking this kasha. Rabbi Huda, Aresha kai ulakula, o dilma asefa kai luchumra. So we'll say, what is Rabbi Huda talking about? Is he referring to the Resha? In which case it's a kula. So meaning is Rabbi Huda is saying like this. The Mishnah says that if you have a Kli Rishon that has been removed from the fire, you should not spice the food. You should not spice the food even in a Kli Rishon that has been removed from the fire. And as Rabbi Huda coming along to say, well, that's only if the food contains brine or vinegar. If it contains ultimately again chometz and seer, fish brine or vinegar, that's when a Kli Rishon that has been taken off the fire has the ability to cook the spices. But if the food in question has neither of those ingredients, there's no concern that the spices will get cooked. O Dilma, or perhaps, Asefa Kai Uluchumra. Or I will say maybe he's commenting on the second part of the Mishnah. It's the second part of the Mishnah. Second part of the Mishnah says you can't spice food when it's in the Kli Rishon, even if the Kli Rishon has been removed from the fire. But once you transfer the contents of the pot to what? To the dish, to the kaira, to the tamchui, you can spice it. And Rabbi Huda is coming along to say what? Well, no, even in the kaira and the tamchui, if the food has brine or vinegar, you can't even introduce spices into a Kli Sheni. And I will say, I know what you're thinking to yourself. You're thinking to yourself, impossible. We just got finished saying that a Kli Sheni doesn't cook. I will say, so really we're going to say the halacha is a Kli Sheni doesn't cook, except in the cases where it does. As we're going to say, we'll see that there are examples of what's called Kali Habishal. So Kali Habishal, which are items that are exceptionally sensitive to cooking, which ultimately, again, we will see that halacha lamaisa, even a Kli Sheni has the ability. So we'll say, so now we're back over here. So what is Rabbi Huda's shita? What is his opinion? So the Gemara says, Tashma, the sang Rabbi Huda Omer, L'kol ilfasin hu nosein, L'kol kaderos, roschos hu nosein. So you could transfer the contents of the pot. Excuse me, I should say differently. You could spice any food. You could add spices to any frying pan. You could add spices to any pots. Also remember again, these are Kli Rishon examples. So Rabbi Huda is saying you could add spices to any Kli Rishon. Now obviously this is not a Kli Rishon on the fire. This is a Kli Rishon after the fire, removed from the fire. Chutz midavar sheyesh bo chometz v'tzir. With the exception, says Rabbi Huda, of something that has brine or vinegar. So we'll say, so ultimately you see that Rabbi Huda actually is being megil, and Rabbi Huda is saying that halacha l'maisa, although the Mishnah said that you can't introduce any spices into a Kli Rishon that has been removed from the fire, Rabbi Huda says that's only problematic when? That's only problematic halacha l'maisa if the contents of the pot has fish or vinegar. That's when the spices can be cooked in a Kli Rishon that's not al gabe ha'ish. But if the food in question does not have any vinegar or brine, then halacha l'maisa, you can add spices once the Kli Rishon has been removed from the fire. Savar Rav Yosef l'meimar, melach hari ketavlin. So Rav Yosef wanted to say that the truth is salt is no different than any other spice. The Kli Rishon b'sheila or Kli Sheni lo b'sheila, that salt ultimately again can be cooked in a Kli Rishon, which means you would not introduce salt into your Kli Rishon, whether your Kli Rishon ultimately again is on the fire or off the fire, but by a Kli Sheni ultimately again it does not get cooked. Amar le Abaye Tani Rabbi Chia, melach eno ketavlin. Rabbi Chia said no, salt is actually different than all other spices. Why? So Rabbi Chia wants to suggest, or Abai is suggesting Rabbi Chia, that in fact salt is more sensitive to cooking, and salt therefore could even be cooked in a klishini, which also would mean that you actually can't introduce salt into a food item until when? Until it gets to a klishlishi status. So upligad Rav Nachman, and this argues on Rav Nachman. What does Rav Nachman say? The Rav Nachman, tzricha milcha bishula kibisra datura. Rav Nachman said that salt requires as much cooking as ox meat. So apparently ox meat requires a lot of cooking. So too salt requires a lot of cooking as well, which Rabbi says is the exact opposite, saying that salt does not easily cook, even in a kli rishon. The ikad da amri savar Rav Yosef lameimar melach hariu kitavlin. Rav Yosef holds that salt is like other spices. The bekli rishon b'shela bekli sheni lo b'shela. That salt will be cooked in a kli rishon, but not in a kli sheni. Amrle Abai said 1 second. Tani Rabbi Chia melach ina kitavlin. But yet Rabbi Chia said that salt is not like other spices. The bekli rishon nami lo b'shela. Salt isn't even cooked in a kli rishon. That's how it was. That's how resistant salt is to cooking. Doesn't even cook in a kli rishon. And that's what Nachman says, that ultimately what? Salt requires cooking, halacha l'meisa, like ox meat. It's just like ox meat requires an incredible amount of cooking, so too halacha l'meisa, salt requires cooking. So we'll say, Shulchan Aruch points out over here, by the way, that the salt that they're talking about is not our processed salt. He's talking about over here unprocessed salt. I guess like mined salt, right? So mined salt, which is I guess much more coarse, not like what we call coarse salt today, but mined salt which has not been processed, not been cooked, is much more resistant ultimately again to cooking. So I'll say, so this, by the way, is another very important sugya. So you're talking about over here adding spices to a kli rishon. We'll say this is my b'chol yom. People taste food on Shabbos, and what happens? It turns out that the dish requires a bit more salt or a bit more pepper or something else. So again, the easiest thing to do is to add the spices to the kli rishon. So obviously, I'm not going to add anything to a kli rishon that's on the fire, because we never add anything to a kli rishon that's on the fire. But once the kli rishon has been taken off, can I add the spices? So let's listen to this. So the Shulchan Aruch writes, this is in Shin Yod Ches, Sif Tes, kli rishon, afil la'achar she'aviro me'ala ish, mevashal. So we'll say we assume that a kli rishon, even once it's been removed from the fire, has the ability to cook as long as it is still yad sola despo. However, therefore, lefichach aser litain l'socho tavlin. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, you are not permitted to put spices into your kli rishon. So we'll say very, very, very important halacha. So we are not permitted in any way to introduce any type of spices or ingredients into the kli rishon, even after the kli rishon has been taken off the fire. Because halacha l'maisa, we say kli rishon retains its ability to cook even when removed from the fire. Incredible. Mishnah, we'll say, let's go right there. This is another great case. Ein nosten kli tachas and the kabel boas hashemen. We'll say the halach is, now we're transitioning for a little bit, going a little bit into the halachos of muktzah. You are not permitted to put a utensil underneath the candle in order to go ahead and receive the remaining oil. Now, both say, now just understand what's happening over here. Look at Rashi. Ein nosten kli b'Shabbos, Rashi says, kli tachas haner, l'kabel bo shemen hametafteif, mishum d'shemen muktzah. So we'll say v'kasavar ein kli nitel b'Shabbos el l'tzorach davar hanitel. Inami kasavar asr levata kli mehechan lo hoshev kli b'makom shlo yuchal od lit lo misham davi kekover lo makom umechabro betit v'dami lemelocha o kli zeh mishiyipo ba Hashem and amuktzah asot. Listen to this. When we say candle, so remember again, candle never means candle like we think about it. Candle means like a lamp. So remember again, they would have an earthenware lamp. You would put oil in the lamp. The lamp had a lip. The wick would come out. The wick would rest in the lip, and you would light it like that. In the case in question over here is your lamp has a leak. So you want to put a utensil underneath the lamp to go ahead and catch the oil that's dripping down. So the Mishnah says you're not allowed to do this. Now Rashi gives one of two interpretations as to why this is problematic. Either A, it's because halacha l'maisa, you are not allowed to move a utensil on Shabbos for a non-permitted purpose. See, remember, the oil is muktzah. The oil is muktzah, right? Why is oil muktzah? Because remember, at the onset of Shabbos, it was set aside for the purpose of kindling this fire. Therefore, muktzah means set aside for non-use. That oil is muktzah. So as possible, says Rashi at the Mishnah is teaching me, you cannot move a utensil on Shabbos for a muktzah purpose. You're not permitted to do that. You can move a kli on Shabbos for a permitted purpose, but you can't move it for a muktzah purpose. Therefore, to move a utensil to catch dripping oil is moving a utensil for a muktzah purpose, and that's not permitted. Ein kli, or to say a little bit differently, ein kli nitel b'Shabbos elu torach davar hanitel. You're only allowed to move a utensil on Shabbos for something that itself can be moved. But since the oil can't be moved, you can't move a utensil to catch the oil. That's possibility one. Possibility two, says Rashi, is that what? Is that, remember, if you go ahead and you move this utensil to catch the oil, we'll say, what happens once the utensil catches the oil? What happens? You can't go ahead and move that utensil anymore, right? So that utensil becomes fixed in place. Rashi says that utensil becoming fixed in place is almost kilu like what? Like you cemented that utensil in place. And ultimately, again, cementing a utensil in place, so we'll say would be what? Rashi says, dami le-malacha. It's like a malacha. Now, it could be the malacha of bona, like building, but that, so Rashi is advancing two possibilities. Again, we'll see this play out in the Gemara. Possibility number one is a more general concept, which is, on Shabbos, you could only move a utensil for something that itself can be moved. In other words, if you want to move a utensil to use for an item, you can only move the utensil if the item you're going to put in the utensil is something that can be moved as well. But oil can't be moved. Once the utensil catches the oil, the utensil can't be moved. Therefore, you can't move the utensil for that purpose. Possibility number two is that once the utensil catches the oil, the utensil itself becomes immobile. And once it becomes immobile, it's as if you have fixed it in place with mortar, almost as if you've created a permanence for that utensil in that place, almost as if you have fixed it with mortar, and that's dami l'malacha. But the Gemara says, but however, if you put the utensil there while it was still day, in other words, if you put the utensil underneath the lamp before Shabbos started, mutter, then ultimately again it's mutter. However, again, you cannot get any benefit from that oil. Or as we'll say, let's say again, the oil is dripping in to the bottom utensil. I figure, great, it's olive oil. I'm going to use it as a dressing for my salad. You can't do that. You can't get benefit from that oil on Shabbos. Why? Because ultimately, again, that oil was not prepared for use. I'm going to say it a little bit differently. Since at the onset of Shabbos, where was that oil? That oil was in a lamp, right? Presumably going to be used to be burned by the wick. Therefore, it is set aside for non-use on Shabbos. Therefore, even if somehow it ends up away from the lamp, like in this case where the lamp is leaking and the oil ends up in the secondary utensil, halach l'maisa, the oil still cannot be used. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Chisda, Afa pisha amru ein nosten kli tachas tarnagolis the kabel beit sasa. Supposed to listen to this case. So Rav Chisda, under normal circumstances, you cannot put a utensil underneath a chicken to catch its egg. Now, what's the case over here? Look at Rashi. Afa pisha amru ein nosten kli tachas tarnagolis the kabel beit sasa. Kishehi matilasa bimkom madron shema tiskalgel utishaber. Supposed to listen to this interesting case. This is a situation where the chicken is laying an egg, and the place where it's going to lay an egg is sloped. So the concern is what's going to happen. The chicken is going to lay the egg, and the egg is going to roll and ultimately get destroyed. So Rashi says over here, I will say, why is this case being brought up? Because the case of putting a bowl underneath the chicken to catch the egg is exactly the same case as what? Putting the bowl to catch the dripping oil from the fire. Right? The egg is muktzah. The egg is going to be muktzah. And ultimately, again, the oil that comes out of the nair is also muktzah. So now that's why we're introducing this case. So therefore you can't go, so you see your chicken is about to lay an egg on a sloped area. You cannot go ahead and put a bowl underneath the chicken to catch the egg. Aval, but what can you do? This is very interesting. What you can do is that halacha l'maisa, apparently if the chicken does lay the egg, you could take a utensil and overturn it and put it on top of the egg to prevent the egg from getting destroyed. So we'll see here, this chilik is very interesting. It's not necessarily intuitive, but it's two cases. On one hand, the Gemara is saying you can't put the utensil underneath the chicken to catch the egg, but you can go ahead and put the utensil, once the chicken lays the egg, you could put the utensil on top of the egg to prevent the egg from getting smashed. Amar Rabba, so Rabba says, my time in the Rechista. We'll say, what's the logic over here? Kasavar, Tarnagolis, Asui Lahatil Beitzasa Ba'ashba, Ve'ena Asui Lahatil Beitzasa Ba'komadron. So we'll listen to this. Rav Chisda's logic is like this. It is common for a chicken to lay its egg in a garbage dump. That apparently was very matzui. That was common. But it is not common for a chicken to go ahead and lay its egg on a sloped area. Therefore what? The Gemara says, V'hatzala mitzuya hitiru, v'hatzala she'ina mitzuya lo hitiru. So look at Rashi just a moment. Bashba. So generally a chicken will lay its egg in a garbage dump, and because of that, v'yishlachush shema tishaber beragle adam v'kofel kli. Therefore, what there's a concern that what could happen about saying, the concern is that halacha l'maisa, maybe when the chicken lays its egg in the garbage dump, people will trample the egg. On the other hand, chickens apparently, again, because you'll Google it, right? Chickens do not normally lay their eggs on a sloped area. So therefore, we'll see, this is incredible. The Gemara says, Hatzala mitsuya hitiru, Hatzala shena mitsuya lo hitiru. Chazal allowed you to go ahead and transport a utensil for what's called Hatzala mitsuya, for a normative case of saving loss. So let's say, so remember again, when the chicken lays the egg in the garbage dump, how do you prevent the egg from getting smashed? How do you prevent that? You overturn the utensil, put it on the egg. That Chazal allowed you to do because that's a normal case. But when to have a chicken laying an egg on a sloped area and to put a utensil underneath the chicken to catch the egg so that it doesn't roll down, that's an uncommon case. In that case, Chazal did not allow you to transport the utensil for a muktzah purpose. So let's remember again, the utensil itself, of course, is not muktzah, but I'm going ahead and transporting the utensil to service something that is muktzah. So what the Gemara is saying over here is Chazal allowed you to transport the utensil to service something that is muktzah in order to save you from a common loss. So going ahead and taking the utensil, putting it over the egg that the chicken lays in the garbage dump, that's normal. That's a regular case. To put it under the chicken to prevent the egg from rolling down, chickens don't normally lay their eggs on sloped areas. So the Gemara says, so we'll just do another line. Abaye says, is that true? That Chazal didn't allow you to move utensils on Shabbos to save you from an uncommon loss. V'atanya, we learned, Nishbar lo chavish al tel barosh kago, meivi kliyamaniach tachtel. We'll say, if you have a barrel of tevel, tevel's untithed produce, and your barrel breaks, your barrel explodes on Shabbos. So what happens? You could bring another utensil to catch the tevel flowing out. Now, remember, tevel is muktzah. Why is tevel muktzah? Because you're not allowed to eat untithed produce, right? You have to tithe it first. You cannot take trumas and maestras on Shabbos. So because of that, tevel is muktzah. But yet, what do we see? What are you allowed to do? If your barrel of tevel explodes, you can catch the flowing out tevel in another utensil. That seems to be a pretty uncommon case of exploding barrels of tevel. That's certainly not something you hear about every day, right? So that's an uncommon case, yet you're allowed to transport, you're allowed to go out and move a utensil to catch the flowing out tevel, to which the Gemara says, Begul fi charati tishchichi depaki. What's the case? Brand new earthenware barrels. Apparently, I will say everyone knew brand new earthenware barrels apparently were subject to combustion. So therefore, again, that was a common case. Okay, one more, we'll say. So the Gemara says, Eisvei, nosten kli takas and the kabel nitzotzos. You could put a utensil underneath the lamp to catch sparks. Then I both say, now again, so it doesn't start a fire. I will say, pashtos, a lamp sparking seems to be pretty uncommon. To which the Gemara says, no, nitzotzos namishrichi. It's common for a lamp to spark as well. Top of Mem Gimel, Eisvei is another kasha. Kofin kara al haner shlo yochaz bekorab. You can go ahead and put a utensil on top of a lamp, on top of a fire, in order that it not start a fire with the beams above it. Now, both said this obviously is talking about a case where you're not extinguishing the fire, because extinguishing the fire will be an Isser D'Oraisa. But you could go ahead and put the utensil on top of the fire to prevent it from allowing the roof to catch fire. That sounds pretty uncommon. Bebate gichini deshiach behudaleka. We're talking about homes with very low ceilings, where it was common ultimately again for things to potentially catch on fire. One more, v'chein koresh nishbara. So if you have a beam that broke on Shabbos, remember that beam is moktzah. Somchin oso besafsal ba'arukos hamita. You could support the beam with a bench or with a bedpost. So we'll say here again, you're transferring an item to support a davar hamoktzah, to which the Gemara said, "B'kishorei charati da'avidi depaki." Ultimately, again, you're going ahead and talking about a new beam that was never really tested, and halacha l'maisa, which are commonly break. Nostin kli tachas hadalav b'Shabbos, bebate chadati d'shchichi dalfi. Similarly, again, you could go ahead and put a utensil underneath a leak in the roof on Shabbos. But a leak in the roof is uncommon, not with new homes. Apparently, new homes often leaked more, and therefore halacha l'maisa. So therefore, we'll stop over here for today, but just understand what the Gemara is doing. The Gemara wanted to suggest, or the Mishnah wanted to suggest, that halacha l'maisa, you cannot go ahead and move a utensil for the sake of a muktzah item, and so the Gemara now brought in this to say you can't move a utensil to go ahead and save from an uncommon situation, only from common situations. That was the chicken case. The Gemara tried to bring up a whole bunch of cases of uncommon losses where you're allowed to move a utensil, to which the Gemara showed ultimately again they're all common losses. So we'll stop over here. We'll pick up with this. I'll record the parsha thought the Mir Hashem after davening. Shkoyach.